Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. And yes, this is another lesson in insanity. Now, as we continue to watch the mainstream media, as we continue to watch persons from the United States government talk about the Russian Federation, talking about how Russia is a threat to other nation states in other democracies. The government is telling us that. The mainstream media, which is allied with that very same current government in charge. Obviously, previously, it was not allied with the previous duly elected president, and you saw that in the media. Now, why should the people of the United States listen to what the government is saying? Why? Now, for me, there has been several incidents, several issues that have occurred over the past several years that has the voice of reason asking questions. And I've talked about some of those questions. I've talked about some of those issues. Now, if we go back to COVID, the epidemic, where the President of the United States, Joseph Biden, we were watching governors from many left-wing states say the following: unvaccinated people are bad. Vaccinated people are good. Unvaccinated people are a risk to vaccinated people. Now, that was one issue that I could never really get my head around, and no one to this day can reasonably explain that to me. How a vaccinated person that should be immune to catching the COVID-19 sickness feel threatened from a unvaccinated person. It made no sense. And to this day, makes no sense. George Floyd. Well, before I get on to George Floyd, another issue. The issue of taking little boys and little girls, manipulating them, grooming them. Some of them have serious mental illness, and then telling them that they should not be a girl or they should not be a boy, and they should be mutilated, they should be castrated, they should be essentially destroyed as a human being. And the government is okay with that. The government is okay with that because they are not preventing the medical industry from harming these children. They are supporting it. And if you are against it, you are what they call a transphobe. Now back to George Floyd. I am now seeing paintings that portray George Floyd as the Christ child, being discussed as on par with Jesus Christ. Now again, as I've talked about before, I am agnostic. I will eventually meet my maker, or I won't. But portraying a criminal that, in all probability, whose death will end up saving life. I say that again. George Floyd's death will probably save lives. Meaning George Floyd eventually was going to kill someone. This is George Floyd's record. This is not easy to get. If you try to search George Floyd's criminal history on Google or some of the mainstream search engines, they do not want you to see this. And this is just a part of his criminal history. 1997, convicted, felony delivery of controlled substances. 1998, convicted, felony, aggravated robbery. 1998, convicted theft. 2001, convicted failure to identify to a police officer. 2002, convicted felony possession of controlled substances. 2002, criminal trespass. 2004, convicted felony deliver controlled substances. 2005, convicted felony possession of controlled substances. And finally, 2007, convicted felony aggravated robbery using a deadly weapon. This man should have been in prison, not on the streets. And that's just the Texas out of Harris County. And yet, he is now being portrayed as the Christ child. Only in this age of madness can a police officer who was protecting the citizenry from this mad dog, George Floyd, go to jail, and George Floyd is portrayed as the Christ child. He is a thug, a criminal, a POS. Absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt. So we have this government lying to us about the sickness. We have this government telling us that we should accept the mutilation of children. We should accept mental illness and make it mainstream. We should accept that hardened criminals are Christ-like deities and should be celebrated for martyrdom. And then when they say that the Russian Federation is a threat to our democracy, is a threat to the United States, I'm supposed to say, okay, all right, absolutely. Absolutely. So can you see where I'm coming from? Can you see my point? It's a big pill to swallow. And as I look at history, as I look at the history of Russia, as I look at the history of Ukraine, as I look at the history of the expansion of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, I have to ask questions. I have to weigh the evidence. I have to say, well, okay, all right, but wait a minute. But wait a minute. You're telling me a unvaccinated person is a threat to a vaccinated person? And I should shut myself into a house and never come out because the vaccine works? Why is that? Explain that to me. Explain that to me. And it can't be explained. George Floyd, the mutilation of children. I have to ask questions. I have to ask questions. And you should ask questions too. Especially as we speak, Russia is now conducting operations, training operations with the use of tactical nuclear weapons. They are now placing hunter-killer satellites into orbit. Do you guys know what happens if a GPS goes down? Do you? Research it. We are not heading in a good direction. It's kind of scary. The age of madness. Have a good day.